Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this UKLFI Charitable Trust webinar on Kinocide, the weaponization of families. Unusually, I begin with a warning as to the subject matter of the presentation and discussion today. This webinar will cover the acts of barbarism of the 7th of October by Palestinian terrorists and the targeting of the family unit as part of their atrocities. The report Dr. Elkayam-Levy will present necessarily involves detailed and graphic language at times, which will be emotionally challenging for viewers, and particularly for survivors of violent crimes. Just over a week ago, the Israeli Ministry of Health released a report to the United Nations on the mental and physical state of the hostages released from Hamas captivity. That report highlighted, amongst other things, the abuse of hostages, including children, in front of other captives. The amplification of suffering through these practices is reflected also in Dr. Elkayam-Levy's work regarding the atrocities of the 7th of October. The term Kinocide, coined in this report, is intended to shed light on the deliberate exploitation and destruction of familial bonds. It describes a systematic and widespread attack directed against families to intensify suffering, and identifies the targeted destruction of the family unit as a specific weapon of war aimed at terrorizing and breaking the spirit of kin and entire communities. The report highlights the profound and enduring impact of Kinocide on individuals, communities, and societies, and calls for urgent international recognition of Kinocide as a distinct international crime against humanity by the international legal system. Dr. Cochav Elkayam-Levy is the founder and chair of the Civil Commission on October 7th Crimes by Hamas against Women and Children, and the Devora Institute for Gender and Sustainable Studies. She has spearheaded national and global efforts addressing the sexual abuse and gender-based atrocities of October 7th. Her contributions include leading a global campaign to amplify victims' voices and establishing an archive documenting these war crimes. An expert in international law and feminist theory, Dr. Elkayam-Levy served as a Sophie Davis postdoctoral research fellow at Hebrew University's Leonard Davis Institutes in a program on gender, conflict resolution, and peace. Elkayam-Levy teaches also at Reichman University and serves as a senior fellow at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Her incredible work has earned her the 2024 Israel Prize in Solidarity and the Medal of Distinction by the Perez Center for Peace and Innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please post your questions into the Q&A facility on Zoom. I will be drawing upon them in the course of our discussion. Cochav, may I first take this opportunity to thank you for the vital work you and your team have been doing over the past year, and invite you to present the report and explain a little more to our audience about the commission you have been heading.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you. I want to thank all of you that have joined us today. And also you, Natasha, for everything that you are doing around the world, speaking for our people in such a courageous manner. So I feel like this is the fight of our generation, to speak truth about what happened, to try to fight very disturbing processes of anti-Semitism, denial, and really the denial of our very basic right to be to exist as a nation. So with that, I want to start perhaps by why we established this civil commission. It started not by our choice. I'm a law professor, as Natasha said. I'm an expert in international law, human rights, feminist theories. very different ideas before October 7 of promoting climate justice and women's rights, very involved in the protest movement here in Israel, fighting for gender equality here and globally. And we found ourselves witnessing what happened on October 7th, quite shocked, like all of us. I often share that the most basic thing that we've lost on October 7th is our basic sense of security. I'm actually speaking to you in from our shelter, from our safe room, which is also my office. But it's just, it struck me after October 7th that I need to explain again and again what is a safe room. So it's a regular bedroom, but a very structured building to just understanding that people don't understand it, that we just have this here in Israel. And anyway, on October 7th, I felt like we're seeing, like all of us, shocking scenes that the world has to respond very quickly, and especially the international legal system, which I teach my students of, and of its importance, especially women's rights organization, UN Women, the International Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, UNICEF. Natasha, you know very well of many mechanisms within the UN that should have responded, that should have first initially acknowledged that the 7th of October has happened, secondly, condemned the crimes against women and children, and thirdly, condemn the crime, express solidarity, and thirdly, just offer help. And we were puzzled and quite confused from the very beginning that they were not responding, not condemning the crimes, and especially not acting quickly for the return of the hostages. So with this very confusing week, I think, few days, I think it was around 10 days that we were shocked to see the lack of response, that we decided to take action. And the best thing we know is to communicate with international organizations. So we turned to many at the UN to respond. To make a long story short, we didn't get any response for many weeks. Response to get back the hostages, to stand with us, to acknowledge the gender-based crimes. And it was the end of October that I was invited to represent the protest movement in Israel. And just, I was the only one among over 50, I think, pro-Palestinian organizations that were already, it was the end of October, already talking about genocide. It's important to acknowledge that we were facing that. I was the only Israeli speaker. And I was asking the International Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women to condemn the crimes, to stand with us, to speak up for what happened to women and children. A day before my speech, they released a statement not mentioning October 7 and not mentioning our hostages, which is an ongoing crime against humanity. I barely could speak there. I was quite shocked that they wouldn't, or not shocked, felt deep betrayal. And I went there to speak after many in Israel have heard that I'm going to speak there and started sending me a lot of information. Cochav, please tell them that this happened. Cochav, please tell them that this happened, and sending me, I can tell you it was a very overwhelming experience to get a lot of images, photos, videos, and just the responsibility to speak up. And I told them, is there international law for Israeli women? Are you going to protect us? Are you going to stand by us? And the realization that they're not responding got us to just take action, just to start documenting everything ourselves. I remember saying we have to establish an archive under the most compelling international standards and start documenting all war crimes against women and children. It was just this understanding, and we started gathering experts, trauma experts, archive experts. The head of the archive today is the former deputy head of Yad Vashem archive. We have Yad Vashem testimony takers and experts in the area of gender-based crimes. We have people from all around the world helping us document this in ways that hopefully will be used for legal processes in the future to get accountability, but also one of the most important goals we had was to preserve the historical record, to make sure we are preserving the historical truth. We already saw denial from so many, and not only denial, but also threats that we were getting for doing this work, threats from pro-Hamas groups. Yeah, so that was the beginning of it. We also started a global campaign for the recognition of the sexual atrocities. And in the process of documenting everything that happened to women and children and looking, no one sort this for us. We get piles of information and we need to go through very traumatizing and violent materials. The exposure itself, I can talk about it. It's a challenge in itself, the exposure to the materials. And what happened is that once we started documenting women and children, we saw that we're seeing a family, another family, and another family that is being attacked. So I will just say that starting to document and collect every piece of information about what happened to women and children. The reason we chose women and children is because they are protected groups under international law. We started seeing crimes against families, another family being attacked and another family. So the terrorists entered the houses, entered the family homes when entire families were still in their pajamas, and they themselves filmed themselves, documented themselves entering the houses with GoPro cameras. And what we saw is that they didn't randomly execute people. Like they started abusing families. And I want to explain, for instance, in the case of the Idan family, one of the worst cases, they entered the house, they shot the eldest daughter. So you see the father shocked, he's entirely covered with blood. The house is filled with balloons of her 18th birthday. We didn't know that. We gradually gathered the information, but you see a scene of the house with balloons, and their little siblings are crying, and the parents look terrified. We understood that we almost physically cannot see this. And we started understanding that we're seeing a unique evil. Like I remember sharing with international scholars around the world, what is this? Have you heard of systematic abuse of families? They use the family's social media. Like they use the victim's social media to broadcast this entire ordeal to the family's wider circles of friends and relatives. Some family members have found out what's going on, what happened to their loved ones through social media, through the social media of the families. And as I said, I started contacting international scholars, asking them, have you heard of the weaponization of families? Can you share with me more information of this that we can understand what we're seeing? And gradually we understood that there is no crime to describe this. There is no crime to describe this. And one of my conversation was with Professor Erwin Kotler, Minister of Justice of Canada, and the head of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights in Canada. I told him, Professor Kotler, I think we're seeing a new crime against humanity. This is kind of abuse that happened to more and more families. And he gave me and gave us the courage to start documenting what happened to families. And family by family, we collected information, we logged it, and we identified 6 distinct patterns that repeated in different locations that verified our assumption that this was not a random attack. It was organized. It was organized in ways that, as I said, you could see that they knew what they want to do. They wanted to create a suffering that I often say, if there is hell, this is how it looks like. Someone abusing your kids, someone abusing your loved ones. And it's one thing to know that you're lost your child. It's another thing to witness it. And they sometimes, what they did is that they separated family members. They executed them, killed them in front of one another. They used, as you said, they used familial bonds to increase suffering. I'll give you another example that we quote in the report, and I'll end with that. The quote of Rotem Matias is a 14-year-old boy from Cholit, and he said that the terrorists entered the house, they entered their shelters, they shot his parents, and he found himself injured. He was injured in this attack, and he found himself hiding under the body of his mom. And he said, and he texted his sister, and then mommy died on top of me. And it's these kinds of heartbreaking testimonies that we got. So Rotem actually also shared, not with us, with the international media, right away. It was October 8th or October 9th that he was interviewed, and he shared that the terrorists returned to burn the house. So what we saw during our visits in the kibbutzim is that they spent a lot of time creating chaos and destruction within the houses, burning houses when families were hiding in the shelters. If they couldn't enter, they just started burning the house. And in this case, they returned to burn their house when the victims were still inside. So he was able to escape through the window, Rotem, and then he was saved. Really in a miracle, that it was a miracle that he was saved. I want to end by saying that once we understood that this is a crime that was never defined, we found ourselves seeking for a name that could describe this kind of the weaponization of families, and describe this kind of suffering. And we called it Kinocide, kin as in familial relations, and side as in the systematic weaponization of families. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Cochav, thank you so much. There are many who are conveying their thanks for you having grappled with this very difficult material for, well, over a year now. I do want to pose some of those questions in terms of your own personal reaction to it, but may I perhaps begin by unpacking a little further the makeup of this commission? Could you describe a little more about its formation, how many people you have been working with across this time, and what the division of responsibility and labour looks like, and your processes for collecting this information and cataloguing it in the way that you've begun to describe?
Yes. So the commission is a civil commission. So this means that we are a non-governmental organizations. We do not accept governmental funds. This was a decision that we made from the very beginning to make sure that we represent only the interests of the victims. It's also one of the first questions that we are asked around the world when we speak with world leaders. Are you funded by the government? Like, it's one of the first questions we are asked, and I think it was one of the best scholars in the world that told us to just do this work as independently as possible. Also a big part of it was deciding to collect almost all of the information ourselves. Like, this is people also come and give us their databases. For instance, a world-known journalist that just went down to the southern part of Israel and started taking videos and images, gave us all of his database. So this is how we started collecting all the information from different sources that have shared with us information. We conducted interviews. Now we also take Yad Vashem like testimonies, like in-person testimonies to the cameras that could last for generations to come. This is similar to the Spielberg project. And as I said, so the head of the archive is Advocate Eleanor Cortero. She's the former deputy head of Yad Vashem Archive. The head of our documentation is Advocate Irit Gazit. She has represented children and women victims of sexual abuse for many years and children at risk, and has a lot of knowledge with victim-centered approach. And she's an amazing person. She has our documentation and the project of getting the testimonies and the information. The CEO of the commission is Advocate Merav Israeli Amarant. She has for many years represented victims of sexual abuse and also been a VP in a tech company for tech for social cause. And so the commission is comprised of researchers. The two researchers that have written with me the report are Dr. Eliyahu Diak and Dr. Michal Gat-Gilad, experts in international law, international humanitarian law, and also children's rights. And we have technological experts, forensic experts that are helping us. So basically, this is the Civil Commission. The report outlines the executive team, and we're happy to share more information about. And we have, as I said, the report was written in collaboration with the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, with the research team there, that have done an amazing work of showing that Kinocide is actually a historical phenomenon that happened elsewhere in other parts of the world in different atrocities, but was never documented as such. So this is what we're doing together. I forgot your second question.
No, I mean, you've covered a great deal, I think, of the background and also the processes. I know that you mentioned the cataloguing of this archive was done according to the highest international standards. What was your process for adopting those standards?
So it's still a process. It will also take many years. Most of the documentation project and also us, what we're doing is first collecting all the information. And we've created a catalog that is all the information is based in a secured systems that Microsoft is providing us, and the cataloging manner is taking into consideration all of the characteristics of the October 7 attack. And I think what's unique is that we are being guided by a center that has documented war crimes for over 20 years. The center is based in one of the US top universities. They've asked to remain confidential, but they have documented gender 20 years and have provided us and are still providing us guidance on how to preserve the information so it could be used not only for historical purposes, but for legal purposes. So that's our goal now.
Thank you. I note that you mentioned elements of this crime of genocide in previous conflicts. The report specifically addresses Iraq, Syria, Rwanda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Sierra Leone, Russia, Ukraine, as well as including analysis of atrocities committed by Nazi Germany and in the Armenian genocide. When you've reflected on those previous instances alongside the atrocities of the 7th of October, have you found parallels there to be helpful? Is there anything particular about the 7th that you think sets these atrocities apart? I note separately, of course, you've talked about the documenting of these atrocities in real time by Hamas and the dissemination of that material on social media, also sending images and videos of these atrocities to other family members that were not present through social media and WhatsApp, of course, also. That is perhaps something new, isn't it? And how does that factor into your analysis of the acts of genocide on the 7th in particular?
Excellent questions, really. Thank you for bringing it up. As part of the process of writing this report, we started meeting victims around the world. A few of them were from the Yazidi community. And what was completely striking or exemplified to me why we're doing this was to see their faces when we described what we're doing. Like when we told them we are documenting the abuse of families, like as a family unit, what happened to families when they are attacked, and to see the look in their eyes telling us this happened to us was kind of, for me, it was the most powerful to know that we are giving language and recognition to what they've suffered. I don't know how this is going to end up, and in international processes, whether it will be incorporated in international law or not. To see their faces, to see their gratitude for us acknowledging what happened to them in that particular manner, as for me, it meant the world. Just to know that we are doing this for them, and also the people from the kibbutzim. For instance, I met two parents when I was that their daughter was murdered viciously, really, in kibbutz Kfar Aza. And when I told them that we're also looking into, it was in the beginning, to the familial setting, to what happened to families, suddenly they told a whole different story. They were able to see what happened to all of them as a family unit. And I think even for them, understanding what they've been through is important. So that's on the global aspect of that, and what it meant to share this with people all around the world, to see their gratitude for the recognition of what happened. The second thing is what sets the 7th of October, I think, apart from other atrocities is what you said, the documentation of it by the predators themselves, systematically doing so. So I went to Canada just a month ago, and I shared at the Halifax International Security Forum the kind of work we're doing. And I think what was most important for them is, I'll say it differently. I wanna say something. Usually we say that that this can happen elsewhere, right? We say this can happen to you. And I think what we are doing exemplifies it, and I'll explain why. Because at a certain point, after reviewing so many materials, we realized that we might be looking at these videos and feeling horrified, but we could see how inspiring these videos are. The fact that they used it live on the social media of the victims themselves, the fact that they use social media so widely to spread what they do. Usually predators or criminals are ashamed of what they're doing. They try to hide it, but here they didn't try to hide it. And you see them, I want to say they were celebrating this. They were chanting religious words, entering the houses with enthusiasm. It took a while, gradually, to see that part of it, the celebration of what they're doing, of the murders, of their really the cruelty that they inflicted, in ways that we were suddenly frightened of the scale this could take on a global setting. It's like it was just shocking to suddenly realize that this is actually very inspiring. So I think very differently from other atrocities, they didn't try to hide it. They were taking pride of it, and more horribly, they were celebrating it. I think Professor Kotler has emphasized the fact that it wasn't just a terrorist attack, it was an anti-Semitic attack. They enjoyed what they did. So
I think it's absolutely right also to raise the incitement that this has undoubtedly given rise to by being so widely disseminated, especially around the Arab world. And it seems clear that that was certainly part of the intention. I think even terrorist leaders had made it clear they wanted certainly Hezbollah to participate as
Join.
much as
Yeah.
possible, but also Israeli Arabs to participate in similar atrocities. I did want to ask also about the planning in relation to the targeting of families that you've described. And I don't know if this is something that you have been able to investigate. There have been separate reports of some of the detailed plans that were found with terrorists that came into the kibbutzim and moshavim in the south of Israel, sometimes that detailed house by house the inhabitants. These were on occasion terrorists with a list of individuals that they were going after. Has that been an element of your study and your analysis, and how does that factor into the notion of Kinocide?
So I think the planning part of it is the role of the national authorities to reveal. We're going to also brief very senior officials in Israel of this report. I think it was it created interest in them to understand what we found. Um, we we focused on the reality itself, on what the documentation revealed, on what happened in each of the kibbutzim in very separate areas, in multiple areas simultaneously, in ways that we could, as I said, we logged all the information in a huge spreadsheet of each and every families of the ones that were murdered and of the hostages. And we started really filling the blanks to see if we're seeing things that are repeating in different areas. And this is how we revealed the 6 patterns of abuse of families, the separation of family members, the execution of family members in front of one another, the use of social media of the victims, really the destruction and vandalism they have created in each and every house. So it was really through the documentation of what happened that we identified these patterns, and this is what we focused on. And it's just the beginning. It's really just the beginning, Natasha, of understanding. And I can tell you that a lot we didn't reveal. We thought it was best to really at this point share. There is also very sensitive information of the victims themselves. So I want to say there is much more to be revealed in the future, not only by us, but by others that will now use this kind of different perspective to look on what happened.
No, I fully appreciate that not all of the information that you are reviewing, of course, will be public, but very important that it is documented and archived in the way that you have described for all purposes and future purposes. Noting, of course, that so much of this GoPro material was immediately disseminated by Hamas themselves. Extraordinary, perhaps, so that in those circumstances, there are still those in the international community and some of the organizations you have referenced who have either turned a blind eye to this or, in some instances, even denied the atrocities themselves. Certainly, the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, comes to mind when she was asked repeatedly about atrocities against women and mass instances of rape. But bearing in mind that disconnect between the reality that you have seen and documented and the refusal to confront it, is there anything that can be done to compel international organizations and governments to confront this reality of genocide, in particular against Jews, instead of dismissing or downplaying its significance? And I should indicate to you that I'm weaving in questions from the audience as we're going.
Yes. That's an excellent question, and I actually still can't get my head around how so many international organizations, so many experts within the UN have chosen to remain silent. and the devastating implications this is going to have in the international system. To know that has failed so deeply, I want to explain something to our audience. When I teach international human rights law, usually my students say, why is it important? Why? It's like it's the most softest mechanisms that who's going to listen to it? And this is what I emphasize, that um, it's the power of values. It's the power of giving voice to victims, that sometimes this is all we have, but it means a lot. And it's a system that was established from the ashes of the Holocaust. What we saw after October 7th is the softest mechanisms fail again and again and again. UN Women, for instance, once released a very weak response to the sexual atrocities and did not even echo the report of the Special Rapporteur on Violence in conflict areas. Others have also remained silent in ways that I cannot explain to all of the people here how many mechanisms have failed. And this, in particular, is a very concerning understanding why we are living for our children, and understanding that we are seeing institutional anti-Semitism. For me to say it as a scholar that believes in the human rights system, it's something that sometimes I hear myself like, Cochav, are you really saying this now? But I feel like it's time that we cannot turn our how would you say, turn our eyes against this. Like we have to face the truth. And the truth is that we are seeing an international system that is working against us as a people. It's not representing the suffering in Israel in any way. It's demonizing us since October 7th. I was shocked to see the use of the social media that I've been following for years, of special rapporteurs, of experts, of UNICEF, of not used to, even once almost, to at the beginning to mention our hostages, but to express concern about Israel and what Israel is going to do and demonize us. And it was it's still very scary.
One of the specific questions is whether you had ultimately a response from UNICEF. But perhaps I could draw that together with your reference to the potential for legal proceedings coming out of the evidence that you are documenting. It seems very much my impression from what you have described, and I must say I'm not surprised
Yes.
that Israel and Israeli victims are unable to rely on international legal institutions for processes of justice or recognition in these respects. So it may very well be that it is a domestic commission or indeed tribunal, perhaps, that may need to be established to properly try those that have been detained, to the extent that they are linked to some of the crimes that you have been documenting. But perhaps in addition to addressing your engagement with UNICEF, you could shed some light on whether you think, in light of some of the questions here, there are mechanisms through other institutions at the UN. The ICC is also mentioned. We can come on to discuss that, that may be used to hold individuals accountable for the evidence that you're gathering.
Also, another excellent question that I think both of us were thinking together how this is going to look like. What accountability, how does it going to look like in different legal systems around the world, in international forums? We're going to see October 7th victims bringing lawsuits and procedures in different countries. And we're going to see different international forums dealing with this. I think the ICC has already revealed its unfortunate decisions, and I won't get into it because it's entirely it's a
Separate
subject
topic.
we could
Right.
speak about for hours, but very unfortunate decisions that do not represent the values of the ICC itself. And I'll end with that. I think when we talk about prosecutions and prosecution of October 7th, I think we need to look historically. We need to think of Nuremberg trials and what they meant for Holocaust survivors, and not for only for them, but for the world. The fact that the world could hear and understand what happened. And a lot of experts, a lot of the discussions in Israel are around the prosecution of the terrorists themselves. But I think we have a greater question to ask. How are the victims going to be heard? What processes to bring their stories, their testimonies to the world to hear? Make sure processes, the procedures are going to be held in English, for instance, or in a way that is translated simultaneously and preserved for the world to hear. How can we do this in a way that brings attention to what they suffered for many years to come? Because the terrorists, they didn't care. They don't care. They came here to murder, and they didn't care what's going to happen with them. Of course, Israel has to make sure all of this. It's an entirely. We can have another conversation about what the prosecution should look like, but I think representing the victims for so long, we understand that they need to be heard.
A few more questions perhaps to weave in here. One asks what the language of the report for the purpose of the documentation and the wider support of victims is. I'm assuming that question was asking is this material being documented and reported on in Hebrew or in English?
In English. So we're writing in English for the international audience. The testimonies are taken in the mother tongue of the victims. So yes, so the testimonies and interviews are done in Hebrew mostly, and the writing that the communications that we make with the world is done in English.
And a number of people are asking for contact information for the Civil Commission, which we will be circulating in an email at the conclusion of this webinar and when we circulate the recording of it. Cochav, there are quite a few questions here that are asking on a similar theme about the underlying material and whether there has been thought given to whether photos or video of that may indeed be published. My sense is that the questioners are wondering whether that may convince those who have hitherto been impervious, it seems, to the reports that have been put out. Some of these questions are written with understanding that this is sensitive material that should not fall into the hands of those that perhaps seek to do further harm to the individuals concerned or their families. But what about the underlying material? Is there a thought process behind how that may either it has been deployed or it may be deployed in future?
Yes, so this is what we do. We ask ourselves these questions every day. What is the release policy? It's called the release policy for the archive. Some of the materials are going to be, I'll say that it's going to be a process that will take years. Our goal is to have the archive accessible for prosecutors, for researchers, for academic researchers. For the general public, it's going to take many years. Many of the materials are extremely sensitive. Some of the families don't know themselves of the information that we have, and they are our most important concerns. We have an ethical code that we go through. It took a few months to develop it with an academic committee. And based on ethical codes, for instance, the Murad Code and other ethical codes of documenting war crimes around the world. And so we've created an ethical code for the commission and for the preservance of the information. So everything now is sealed in a secured system. which throughout the year, some of the information will be more accessible, some of it will be closed and only accessible with specific permissions. At the beginning, when I said we have to establish an archive under the most compelling international standards. I remember saying these sentences again and again and again, and I didn't know what it entails. I just knew that this is our mission. Today, talking with so many archive experts, I understand how complicated it is, how each and every item has its own, release policy. So some of the information is not as sensitive. For instance, we are collecting media coverage. And so since it is open in the media, we can open it from the public, but some of the information, as I said, is very sensitive. Some of the families themselves don't know of its existence. And I'm not sure they want to know. So we have to respect that. And this is what we're doing. And we are briefing global leaders and experts on a regular basis. So world leaders that want to know, that ask us to brief them on the information. And I think this is the most important thing that we do, that we give credible information to those who need it at the moment to create policies, to know how to respond to these issues.
Cochav, there are a couple of people who have specifically asked about the use of drugs that have induced psychosis in the terrorists who committed these atrocities. Is that something that you have looked into? Are the effects of those perhaps apparent in the material that you have reviewed? And do you think, in a legal sense, that this would impact at all in terms of an assessment of the crimes that have been committed?
So we've heard of it from the very beginning, but we did not collect information or have information to confirm or deny this. So this is for the national authorities to investigate, to look into through the investigation of the terrorists themselves. Perhaps they have more information, but we do not accept of the information that is available for the general public.
And also a couple of questions here concerning the hostages in Gaza, whether there has been work included in respect of, I mentioned at the very outset in my introduction, the very recent Ministry of Health report into the evidence that was provided by those that had been released from captivity in Gaza as a result of the hostage release deal that Israel was able to achieve. But of course, that's a separate matter from the work that you've been doing. Is there a degree of overlap, and do you think that elements of their testimony would be helpful for the work that you're doing?
Certainly, it has been helpful and it will continue to be helpful. We are collecting information from the day itself and from the hostages and on the hostages that are still in captivity. For instance, Yarden Bibas, he was one of the most horrific videos is when Hamas released his video to the families, when you see him speaking right after they told him that allegedly his wife and his two children were murdered, and he looks devastated, and they abused the fact that he doesn't know what happened to his wife and children. They were separated immediately when they were taken hostage. On this, I want to mention that the hostages, unfortunately, have experienced sometimes all of the 6 patterns that we identified. So, for instance, some of the families have had their house ruined and nothing else. They had the terrorist enter the house, ruin everything, tearing things apart, like spending a lot of time in creating destruction. I want to emphasize this because they wasted time. They could have, if that they could have, killed more people, but they entered the houses, created destruction. So some of the families only experienced that only, right? It's terrible as it is. They were hiding and they were able to lock themselves. But the hostages, those who were taken hostage, those who returned, I've experienced the separation, the witnessing of family members murdered, taken hostage right after. For instance, Avigail Lidan was held by her father when he was killed. Her mother was, when he was murdered, her mother was murdered, and she was taken alone to captivity. So now I forgot the question. The question is that we are documenting what happens in captivity, as far as we have the ability to investigate, and the condition of the hostages and their stories and testimonies since.
Cochav, there's one questioner here that references the organization Memory, which documents and translates a great deal of media from the Arab world. And the questioner writes that they have seen many discourses by Islamist scholars on this material about the obligation, that's in quote marks, to humiliate and shame Jews.
Exactly.
Particularly captured women through rape and enslavement, as well as the obligation to kill all Jews. And the questioner asks whether you found any specific texts that were relied upon from these terrorist organizations or indeed Iranian leaders about the justification or need or the obligation to create this spectacle of family members and their brutal destruction, and also to broadcast it, to spread the terror that you've described.
So another excellent question. So one of the parts that we could not refer to in this report, and is a huge issue, is the religious motivations, the religious motivations behind this. Not only the religious motivations, but really all of the religious aspects of this attack and the radical Islamism, and what brought them to chant religious sentences and throughout the attack itself. So we could not have referred to it because we don't have the specific expertise, but it is interesting that now many that have responded to the report were those who have investigated radical Islamism, and that are expressing interest in elaborating more on this aspect of Kinocide. They want to look into this. They have their own explanation of this. So this is a super important aspect that we could not have explored, but is critical for future investigation of these crimes.
And some of the victims of these crimes have been dual nationals, and one questioner asks whether any other countries have requested information from you or the members of the Commission in relation to their nationals that you may have documented.
So we are, as I said, we are briefing leaders from Canada, from the United States, from Europe, from France, from several European countries, both formally and informally. And we will continue to do this and provide them with all necessary information. We're still not uncertain on how this is going to develop in each and every country in terms of legal procedures and how our involvement is going to look like. It's still unclear in every country, different systems, different legal processes, but we are definitely doing this. I wanted to mention something that I don't want to forget saying this evening. I think and I'm sorry to be answering my own question now. I think one of the things that concerns me now, one of the challenges that we are seeing, and perhaps you will agree with me, Natasha, is that denial is becoming more sophisticated. So at the beginning, it was like social media trolls that were denying this, very anti-Semitic social media figures that were even attacking us, because the issue of women and children and the attack of women and children is one of the weaknesses of Hamas, one of the only issues that they have received some kind of condemnation, even internally. from other Muslim groups. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more scholars, especially on the sexual atrocities, joining the kind of questioning what happened in a more sophisticated and intelligent manner, that for us, it only strengthens the understanding that what we're doing is crucial, like preserving very meticulously everything. So that at least future generations would know how to handle this more in better ways that we can, because sometimes you see just blatant denial or very, it's one thing, there is an image that some artist here in Israel has created. It's called Murdered Twice. Like it was women were murdered first time, or we all experienced this very vicious attack, and the second time was when it was started to be denied. Like it when the fact that we had to fight for recognition, even the fact that we are documenting this. I often think, wow, why are we doing this? Like we live here, we are, as I said, exposed to the most horrific materials in ways that for me, I feel sometimes very frustrated that we need to do this. I
There are a
don't
number
know if it
of
makes sense.
It certainly does. And I think that resonates enormously with our audience because there are a number of individuals from the UK, from the US, from elsewhere who have asked how they can help with the work that is being done.
Oh, we need you to be our ambassadors. We need you to create conversations, webinars like this elsewhere around the world. So about the sexual atrocities, there is Sheryl Sandberg's film Screams Before Silence that was, I think, crucial in creating some kinds of conversation in different communities around the world, and it was translated to many languages. And I think in a very intelligent way, it exposes what happened on October 7th. And about the Kinocide, now that the report is there, we need your help to send it to as many people as possible to allow us to speak about it in other parts of the world. We are planning to establish a panel of experts to define side. I'll need your help with that, Natasha. And yeah, we just need to be heard and speak the truth wherever we can, and have you help us with that.
That will, of course, be my pleasure, if I can use that term, but an honor perhaps is better in these circumstances. I mentioned right at the start, Cochav, that there had been a number in the audience who were concerned about the impact that this work was having on you, and some have asked whether you are getting the support that you need for what you have witnessed and are continuing to have to review. I hope that you'll be able to give our audience some reassurance on that front.
Yes, so we have an entire emotional support system for the entire team. I cannot say that it's enough. It's as I said, these are very violent materials, and what we've done that we've created methodologies for ourselves. For instance, we watch the materials only in teams. We found that witnessing and working on analyzing this by ourselves is very difficult. So we've created these rules for ourselves, these methodologies of working in teams, working in the morning hours to create some kind of a buffer from when we are exposed to this to when we return to our homes and families, minimizing and limiting the time of exposure. Creating group sessions. Now we're starting group sessions. I get therapy per month now, every week. It's just that I'm smiling because I think what helps me the most is actually my children, the time with my children. I have a 3-year-old who I call my emotional support baby. So I feel like the time with them is the most healing, and thank you so much for recognizing this, because I think this is the hardest part of what we're doing.
Well, for that and for everything else that you have been doing, I know I'm tremendously grateful. There's a great deal of thanks coming from the audience. Thank you for taking the opportunity, Cochav, not just for working on this report and briefing um, international leaders, as you've explained, but also for doing these sorts of very important educational sessions. And there were many more questions than we've had the opportunity to get through, but we will be circulating the report itself. And I hope that some of the additional questions will be answered on that basis. It really has been an honor to meet you in LA several months ago now, where I know that you were speaking about these issues before the report came out, and also to attend Sheryl Sandberg's screening over there, where you answered questions and contributed in the context of the panel discussion. We're certainly in awe of the task that you and your team have taken on, and wish you every success in getting this message out and getting the proper recognition that this material so very badly needs and that you and your team deserve. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sending a warm hug from here and a prayer for the return of all of our hostages. Thank you so much.
Certainly echo that. Thank you.